Welcome to Cube and Chaos. Spend some time with us, enjoying old cards and new, whether they are weak or powerful.
Hey everyone, it's Max. You probably know me better as FiniteMTG.
And I'm Jacob, known as Cr4cksh07.
Alright, we are here today to talk to you guys for the first time about Cube and Chaos, the name of our new podcast, and also our subject material.
Yeah, so welcome everybody. Recently there have been quite a few very nice events on Magic Online that we have enjoyed playing. And we want to start talking about these first with you. And the first thing that also sparked a little bit the idea for this podcast was the Grave Cycling Chaos Draft on Magic Online. So what was that about?
Yeah, so normally Chaos Draft, you just have any number of sets. Most of them tend to be old. You throw them together, you get one pack of each, and you just see where you end up. There's usually not very much synergy. It's usually a lot about pure card evaluation, and sometimes you end up running some real clunkers, but it's always a good time. This time it was a little different. They've been mixing it up lately on Magic Online. So Grave Cycling, if you missed it, it involved a lot of cards with and sets with graveyard synergy and also cards with cycling. And it was Wizards' attempt to combine these two themes into a cohesive, if you will, Chaos Draft format, which, we've never really seen a synergistic chaos before. So I think it was a really kind of unprecedented format.
Yeah, it was certainly interesting. I, however, had the feel that it didn't strike the theme as strongly as the name intended. If they would have just advertised it as basic Chaos Draft and then people figured it out by themselves that there is a theme behind it, that might have also been an interesting way to go about it. Since some of these sets, especially the graveyard themes, I felt like were quite loud in some of the packs. But the cycling felt a bit like a throw-in theme just to be able to include the recent set, which I do like that they did that. Because, as they also said on their website, in previous installments of Chaos Draft, they always somehow excluded the most recent set. And I did like to see it here.
Yeah, I think it was a really interesting choice, too. I agree with you that we did not see necessarily as much support for cycling as we did for general graveyard synergies, and I think that makes sense. Just throwing a bunch of cycling cards into your deck maybe get you closer to Threshold if that's something you're playing toward, a mechanic that requires you to have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Kind of going off of some interesting choices of set inclusions, one kind of glaring and pretty recent block that I think should have made it in there was a Moncat. So a Moncat, you had both Embalm, Internalize, and a ton of cycling going around as well. So to me, that seemed like a really synergistic potential inclusion, and I was left wondering a little bit why they chose not to include it.
I also didn't get that. The nice thing about the cycling in general is it will make it easy for you to find playables. I have run worse cards in my decks than 2 colorless mana to draw a card. It happens.
Yeah. In Chaos Draft, sometimes you end up scraping for playables, or, you have to suck it up, say you're not too proud to play your 3 mana 2/2s or 4 mana 3/3s. And yeah, as we've seen the phenomenon of cycling in Ikoria just sweeping the format, red-white cycling, I remember pretty early on being a dominant force. Even the 2 mana cyclers in Chaos Draft, even without the crazy synergies, are still totally fine cards to play in your deck.
Yeah, and what I noticed also in this Chaos Draft installment is, even though the cycling was in the name of it, I did see some Zenith flares go unpicked, basically. Like I saw them with 3 cards left in the pack and I didn't want it and nobody wanted it. It didn't deliver on that front that much, but it still was a lot of fun, in my opinion.
For sure, yeah. I think one of the best ways to have fun playing Magic is when you get really ambitious trying something fun or original and go for some kind of unique theme.
Yeah, and when you sometimes have a few stinkers in your set or in your draft deck, and they are like the background and they let the few very nice synergies and the hallmarks of your deck shine even more. I feel like sometimes that makes it even a little bit more exciting when you finally draw that synergy piece that you were waiting for. So, did you have a favorite deck this installment of Chaos?
So, it was really hard for me to choose a favorite deck. I started looking, I think, at maybe 5 of them and then narrowed it down to 3. And I decided I didn't want to go based on something like power level or whether or not the deck trophied. I wanted to go based on just, I guess, synergy and how fun I thought the deck was.
Yeah.
So I ended up going with this red-white list, and I started taking removal really highly with this one, and it was late in Pack 2 I picked up Goblin Slide. So for those of you not familiar with that one, it's 2 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you may pay 1. If you do, make a 1/1 Goblin with haste. And so this deck, just out of nowhere, ended up picking up that card, and it really brought the deck together in a way I did not expect. You had cards like Soul Summons, 1 and a white to manifest or sort of turn the top card of your library into a morph, right? Which
double creatures.
Yeah, exactly. So you had a bunch of cards that look like just average or slightly below rate creatures, which trigger the Goblin Slide. And if you pay an extra mana, you're able to make a goblin along with that creature. And that's where the synergy started coming together. So you have another one is Fierce Invocation, 5 mana to manifest the top card of your library and put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And just a card like that feels really nice to play when you're looking at like a 5 mana 4/4 in the sideboard or something like that. Just that tiny bit of extra value, that little increment that you get there. And then I guess the last really nice part about this, so some of the synergistic cards that care about non-creature spells care specifically about instants and sorceries. But Goblin Slide is a little more versatile. It counts any non-creature spell. And so I was able to pick up a Flowstone Embrace relatively early. It's an unusual one. It's 1 and a red for an enchantment aura. You can pretty much use it to kill a creature. Every now and then you'll use it to pump something. But yeah, you can tap the aura itself to give a creature +2/-2. And then something really fun happened, which was I went into a Theros Beyond Death pack. I saw a Dreadful Apathy and a Heliod's Pilgrim. And I was thinking, okay, so now we have the Dreadful Apathy, and we can pick that up and try to wheel the Pilgrim. And so now we have a second target for the Pilgrim. Because the Pilgrim, of course, can find an aura, so you can find that Dreadful Apathy, or you can find the Flowstone Embrace. And of course, they're both potential triggers for the Goblin Slide as well. So I really had a lot of fun with this one. Yeah, it was really fun.
It's also so unusual to get aura removal in red. Like, there are not that many of those.
Yeah, no. That kind of thing, that's why I love Chaos Draft. You have these really, like, niche interactions that, you're able to put together in a surprising way. And yeah, just playing a red-white control deck, how often does that come together, regardless of the card types in it?
Yeah, that's very nice.
So how about you, Jacob? Did you have a favorite deck from this past Chaos season?
Yes, for sure. I was lucky enough to be able to build a companion deck, and it happened to be a Yorion, the Sky Nomad, the one that requires you to play 20 more cards than your normal deck size minimum. And I picked it up as the pick 1 in Pack 2. and I was luckily set up in a way where I could try to make this happen. I was basically just green at that point, flirting with black. And so these ended up to be the open colors. But Yorion being blue-white casting cost obviously required me to play a little more colors. So it ended up being a everything but red deck. But the main colors were black and green. And I was quite lucky. Like, it's not easy to get 60 or, well, let's say 35 playable cards in Chaos Draft. But I did. And that was partly also because this installment, the packs were a little bit higher in power level on average than in some other more random Chaos Draft environments. Yeah, so the highlights certainly were the fixing that I picked up. I had 4 pieces of fixing, 3 were green, and a Military Sphere Cube All-Star, one of the most first pickable cards in my opinion. It's an artifact for 2 colorless mana, or generic mana, and you can, for another 2, sacrifice it to search your library for 2 basic lands and put them into your hand. And if you have that card in your hand, like it just fixes all your problems. Fixes your mana, card advantage.
Fixes your mana and your problems, right?
Yeah, it's just decently costed, and it's a beautiful card. It's not for every deck, but for most decks, it's very, very impressive. Yeah, and I had a few good cards in there, just power level wise. I really liked the Rocks Meditant I had in there. It was sadly my only really good... the Rocks Meditant and the Avid Visionary. Like 2 creatures. One is a 1 and a green 1/1 that comes to play and draws a card. And the other is a 3 and a white 2/4 that comes to play and draws a card if you control a green permanent. And those were my 2 cards that I could re-trigger with Yorion. So these were... They're already quite good cards that I like a lot.
Yeah. No, this looks like a ton of fun for sure. You have a lot of fixing there, a lot of really powerful cards, some nice multicolor stuff, and the Mana Force Mace. That's a nice one for sure.
It only went 2 and 1 because if you're realistic, this deck is not really doing anything before turn 3, and there are decks that punish you for that quite severely.
Yeah, I played a lot of those in this past Chaos format.
I do like to play those as well.
Yeah. The only opportunity I had to pick up a companion in this past Chaos format was Khedira, and even though I first picked it, there was just no way I was going to be able to put all the creature types together I needed to make that work.
Yeah, but this deck and picking up the Yorion in beginning of pack 2 makes me think about one small thing that one could take from this Chaos Draft for maybe cube design. I don't know if it's possible to do this if you are playing the cube online, but I think it would be an interesting format if you would seed your second pack with 1 companion out of the 10, but in pack 2. So you don't railroad yourself, but you need to then see this very powerful, nice card, and you need to figure out, can I still slot this one in my deck, or will I get past one that might fit better? Knowing that they're there, I think that could be a fun thing for at least a few drafts.
Yeah, I think that'd be a nice way to mix it up. One of the things I actually really dislike about just the mechanic companion is if you have a card like Obosh or a card like Gyruda and you have it pack 1, pick 1, suddenly, you pretty much know how your deck is going to look before you've even drafted it.
The deck's tiny. Right. The pack is tiny.
Yeah. And I feel like a big part of drafting and the fun of it is the flexibility and knowing from your first pick how your deck is going to look. I think that diminishes a lot of the fun and creativity.
Yeah, for sure. So that's why I thought about having these companions in pack 2.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good choice.
I don't know if it will work, but it's something that I will keep in mind and maybe try out. So did you have any new pet cards from this Chaos Draft? Did you find a hidden gem somewhere that you will include in your cube?
Well, I don't know if I would call it a hidden gem, but there was a card which in the past I think I would have looked at the card, decided it wasn't playable, and just moved along. But this was actually, I don't want to call it an all-star, but it was an important component of one of my decks that trophied. And looking at it at first glance, it still looks pretty underpowered. And the card's called Cephalid Scout. It's 1 and a blue for a 1/1 flyer, and for 2 and a blue, you can sacrifice a land to draw a card. So I saw this card. I was thinking about whatever the red Rummager is called from Theros Beyond Death, the 1/3.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how different is sacrificing a land from rummaging, right? Because a lot of the time you're going to be rummaging away a land anyway. And I already knew I was going to be playing blue-white flyers when I had the card. I knew my deck was going to be super low to the ground, and excess lands are just dead draws. So I figured, you know what? This is, it doesn't look like it. It looks just like a clunky body and a bad ability. But I think this is actually, a way of getting in some extra points of damage, a way of turning dead draws into live ones. And sure enough, it actually performed really nicely. So don't sneeze on the 2-mana 1/1 flyer.
I would argue that this is better than the Rummager, because you don't have to play your game with the card in mind and keep cards in your hand that you might or might not want to discard. You can just play out all your lands, and when you draw it, bam, you can immediately use it, get the value, even if they have removal. I think it's quite nice.
Yeah, I think it's pretty nice too. Is it better than the Rummager? I'm not totally sure. There were definitely times where I wished I could play an additional land from my hand so I could rummage that one away too.
At some point you get a bit limited because of the land drops, that's true.
Right. But yeah, I'm with you on that. I think the card's really nice, and yeah, you don't have to play toward it. You can just play anything in your hand.
Yeah, and it's also, it's a very intriguing card for a common, I think. There's so much going on a small card.
Right.
And you can always find an environment that is low power enough where this can shine. And just with it enables so many synergies also. It fills your graveyard, it triggers Revolt. It's a nice card. I do like it a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, for me, the card I fell in love with was the Gloom Drifter. It's also a bit of an older card. It's 3 and a black for a 2/2 flying uncommon zombie. And if you have thresholds, so 7 or more cards in your graveyard, when it comes to play, it gives -2/-2 to all non-black creatures. And I feel like this card just slots nicely into the theme in my cube. It's somewhere between a Flametime Kavu and a small sweeper, but also it's not like a sweeper that you play on turn 2, 3, something, and immediately sweep the aggressive deck's board. Because you need to fill the graveyard first. It's a bit slow, but it's on a stick, so I do like the card. I'm not sure how powerful it is in a cube setting, but I already added it to my Peasant cube and hope it will perform there. However, when I looked at the card recommendation feature on Cube Cobra today, the number 1 suggested cut for my cube is the Gloom Drifter. So,
well, I guess it's just perfect then.
Yeah, maybe. It's certainly a hidden gem.
Yeah, it's a nice one. It reminds me, I don't know if you know this card, but Keening Banshee. I think it was in one of the old Ravnican sets, 4 mana for a 2/2 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. And I feel like there's just so much more there than in the Keening Banshee. Keening Banshee, it's going to be good. It's going to be good most of the time. But Gloomdrifter is just so much more interesting. The floor is so much lower and the ceiling so much higher. It requires you to, do work. It doesn't just go into any deck.
Yeah, and also that you can play it ahead of combat to clean the blocks out, or like make the blocks very bad for your opponent and attack all out, like clearing board stalls, or you can play it after combat to finish something off. Maybe they block in a way that gives you threshold. I don't know. I think there are nice play patterns with this card.
For sure. It definitely was great when the Oracle, or the Oracle 888 on Twitch, had 2 of them in his deck. That was... Yeah.
2 of an uncommon in Chaos Draft is just so unlikely. Yeah. But with this one, because it was only 18 packs, I believe, 18 different sets, so they had to have double packs.
Yeah. Speaking of double packs, just before we move on, I feel like double packs are actually one of the least fun parts of this past format, in my opinion. Just because, I feel like the amount of chaos, I guess, decreases quite a bit. But more specifically, when you have old sets mixed with new sets, and you're giving one person 2 copies of a card from Torment, and hey, maybe it is Gloomdrifter, and that's pretty cool. But you're giving somebody else potentially 2 copies of a card from Ikoria. The just cards,
a random common.
Right? Yeah, it's just not very comparable. I remember, I think either the second or third Chaos Draft deck I had in this Grave Cycling format, I played against someone with both Fire Prophecy and the Red Mythos, and I was just thinking, okay, so is red insanely open and you somehow wield one of those? Or, much more likely, it's the double packs. Yeah. And I don't know, that kind of thing, it just feels bad knowing that somebody else got 2 packs of the really powerful new set when you didn't have that experience.
Yeah, that is true. I did like the Ikoria, though, in general. Mutated and all its weird rules interactions really coming up in Chaos Draft was certainly very nice. And being such a small Chaos Draft package made it more likely that they came up. So I really like seeing just some, phantom creatures from Torment with something mutated on it, and they will never die because all the damage is prevented. It's cool.
Yeah, that's definitely a nice interaction. It's like Fertilid on steroids.
So Decaru Cube was just there last week. Decaru is the founder of Cube Cobra, at least for me, the cube organizing website of choice. And he designed a cube for CubeCon, which sadly right now can't take place. And this cube is a legacy cube, I would call it. And I would say that it has only very light themes. On the official post on the mothership for the Decaru cube, there were 10 color pairs and 10 themes suggested in there. How did you feel about this cube and these color pair synergies?
It seemed like almost everyone I talked to really was a big fan of this cube. And I was definitely excited as I read through the article too, just reading about a bunch of archetypes that we don't normally have in the Magic Online cubes. And I think really with these Cube Spotlight Series cubes, it's really just an opportunity to have something different than your modern legacy vintage cubes, that kind of thing.
Yep.
I do have to say, the light nudges toward themes, I think that might be for the better, so you don't end up, I guess, railroading someone.
Yep.
But at the same time, I definitely was hoping I could just end up in that stacks archetype every time, and when I realized the themes were a little lighter, that you couldn't just force stacks and just end up there the way you can with some of the, I guess, macro archetypes like aggro or control. I'll say I was a tad disappointed.
Yeah, it was definitely not an easy cube to draft, because I felt like it's a very competitive environment in the cube, because both in this cube and the next one that we'll talk about a little later, they pay a lot of attention to making aggro and control viable and in balance to each other. And both of those can really punish you if you just go for a cute theme deck and don't pick cards that, while not necessarily important to your theme, allow you to stay alive against aggro or not fall to one of the big finishers of the control deck or something like that. So it puts a strain on your deck, and you can't just play all cute for your synergies.
For sure, yeah. You don't get to dirtle around forever without worry about being run over or having all your spells countered. And I think in terms of that choice on the part of the creator, I think that choice makes sense. I think there are a lot of people who feel like part of Cube means having those strategies. Like you have aggro, you have mid-range, you have control, and I think a lot of people, if they tried to play an aggro deck and they couldn't, they would say, hey, something's up. You know, I can't attack with my 1-mana 2/1s. Like this, this is not what I would call a cube. So I feel like there's a lot of pressure there to make that into a real viable archetype.
Yes. There is. It's. I think it's for a competitive environment, it's a very good cube. But if you happen to be in a draft pot with a lot of people that just want to do the dirtly stuff, then you see all these amazing aggro cards go very, very late. And you just know if somebody decides to pick them up, they will probably 3-0, and some opponent in the finals will be very mad, like, what pot was that? But, yeah.
Yeah.
With import play, this doesn't happen, and everybody is at their own fault, but...
Yeah. And that goes back to the addition of leagues to Magic Online. And I must say, as a time saver, they're an enormous help. But every now and then, I miss that, bit of traditional Magic that you get from in-pod play.
Yeah. That is something, I think it's even stronger in Cube Draft. In Chaos Draft, for example, I don't mind so much. It's just, you don't know what's going on anyway. But in Cube Draft, knowing that normally it's a singleton format, and knowing that cards you have, they can't have, and you roughly know what you have passed, it makes a big difference in the gameplay. It almost feels like it's already a game 2 or game 3 where you have a rough idea about what's going on in your opponent's deck.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really fun part of the game too, making inferences about what your opponent can and can't have in their deck, in their hand, just based on, the information you have. I do think it makes the experience kind of a little deeper.
Yeah, for Cubed, it's certainly nice when that happens. So, did you find any cards in the Cube that were especially interesting to you?
I guess just off the top of my head, Smallpox, when I saw that one next to Stacks, Smallpox was a pet project of mine back in my little-known past as an attempted constructed player, which don't need to worry too much about that, but but I just think it's a really sweet card, and I was excited to see it in the cube.
It is. It's a very nice card. I did like some cards and themes a lot. I was very happy that Blood Artist and what is the other one called?
The Zulaport Cutthroat? Or
Zulaport Cutthroat, yes. I was really happy to have them in the cube. I do like these cards a lot, And also they played quite well. This theme was, I felt like, the most supported one. And also what is very interesting is I did one draft of this archetype. I felt my deck was quite good while drafting. And then in pack 3, I passed an early Judith. It would have fit perfectly in my deck, but I took a monocolored card. I don't even remember which one. Thinking this should surely wheel. But it seems like there were even 2 people in the same archetype. And I did 2-1 with the deck, but I did miss that Judith dearly.
Right. Yeah, that's the worst feeling. When there's a great card that you could have picked during the draft, and it's hard not to hang on to that feeling as you play the matches. But I think that's the sign of a well-supported archetype. If you have 2 people in a pod, going for the exact same 2-color combination, the same synergies.
Yeah, exactly. So what I got from that is that these archetypes some were well supported and some were not so well supported, I feel like. And what I learned, communication about your cube can be very important. I know that not everybody that drafts with you wants to hear or read all of that stuff, but at least you don't want to mislead people. I don't feel like that was done in this spot. I think it was communicated quite clearly, but it's also important when it is.
Yeah, I'm on board with that. Moving on to Cultic Cube.
Yeah, that one is available right now.
Yeah.
I have only done 2 drafts so far. One I have not played out, I only drafted. So the idea of this one is that it basically has no themes. Like after drafting, I almost feel like this is not quite true, but at least they're not bigly advertised very much. The advertisement is that it's the most core components of Magic, most core deck types is in aggro, mid-range, and control, with combo, as they call it, or as Card4cksh07 calls it, available in the form of cheating big creatures into play. And there are different ways to do that. But the rule, it's a hard rule that none of these cheat into play cards cost less than 4, except for if they are creature based. So there are some Necromancers, I don't know the exact name, it's 2 and a black, 2/2. You can tap it and sack it to return a creature card from your graveyard into play. And this is an interesting choice, I feel like. But there are also in green some cards like Elvish Piper, Norwood Priest. Like, I like that this is available, but it feels very weak compared to the aggro and control cards. Like, Jace the Mind Sculpture is there. And all of the good cards for mono red aggro that are in the Vintage Cube on Magic Online are all also there.
Yeah. Same with mono white, I think. You have something like Hero of Bladehold, I believe, which, in my opinion, is probably the best finisher in mono white. Just like attack twice with it and they die, pretty much. Even attacking once, usually.
It's brutal, yes.
Yeah. And it does seem like, even though we have Through the Breach and Sneak Attack, I don't think we see anything like 15 mana Emrakul, do we? I'm pretty sure like
no,
Eldrazi are weaker. Yeah.
There are Eldrazi there, but like Pathrazer of Ulamog or something is there. Like it's an 11 mana 9/9 with Annihilator 3 and can only, like Super Menace, can only be blocked by 3 or more creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there are good cards to cheat into play, but not as good as Vintage Cube or something like that.
Yeah.
But the choice of fatties is nice. Like, it's interesting to see different fatties now. Like, removing all the Eldrazi, opening up space for rarely seen cards. I do like that. For example, there's the Dragon, which is a cool choice. I've never seen that card before. It's some supplemented product, and it's an Wooburg and 4 10/10 flyer. then something with command zone stuff, irrelevant flavor text, and when one or more dragons you control attack, you may draw that many cards, then you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. And it's a very interesting inclusion, I feel like. If you sneak attack that in, smack the opponent for 10, then draw a card, put in another fatty that stays permanently, it's very nice.
For sure, yeah. I think actually going back to the other cube as well, one of my favorite things, I already mentioned how it's nice to have a contrast to the Magic Online cubes that we see pretty regularly, but I think one of the best ways to create that contrast is with these cards from supplemental products, the Conspiracy, the Commander cards, and I think, Commander, one of the Commander releases, that's what the Ur-Dragon is from, and it's, definitely a spicy one.
So, but my favorite card from this cube that I have already added to my cube as well now is an enchantment called the Bloodline. It's 1 in a black, and it has an activated ability of 1 and discard a card. Put a 1/1 black vampire knight creature token with lifelink onto the battlefield. Activate this ability only once each turn. So, while you can make 2 of them per turn cycle. And I think it's a very nice card. Like, it enables like graveyard synergies. It produces tokens. In my cube, it triggers some life gain matters cards.
Yeah, I like that card too. It's a pretty nice and synergistic one.
Yeah, it's certainly not like a powerhouse, but I do like these kind of cards a lot. It's a lot going on.
For sure. I remember that card back in Shadows over Innistrad Limited. It was pretty good there.
I don't remember it there. Like, I might have seen it, but I don't know how strong it was.
I think it was pretty good. Whenever you were able to pick up the Madness payoffs with it, or even just excess lands, converting those into board presence.
It would work very well with the Madness team as well. I don't have that right now, but it's something to keep in mind. I think it's just a very versatile card. I like it.
Yeah. So as we mentioned, for both Dekaru and the Cultic cube, we've seen big presence for aggro and control, and I think that's been especially true in Cultic cube. In my first draft of it, I realized that the most open seat was mono red, so I decided to try to go for a mono red deck, and I ended up being in a spot where mono red was so open that I ended up playing 60 card mono red, no Yorion in the sideboard though, and yeah, it was fun. I think I was down to either 22 or 23 lands, and it was surprisingly consistent, but maybe not so surprisingly if you have a lot of experience with mono red. Most of the cards are quite good, and they do very, very similar things to each other. And I just, going off of that, I guess, I wanted to mention this concept that I've conceived, which is the aggro test. I think if you want to have a bunch of different archetypes in your cube, the best way to test all of those archetypes is simply with aggro. If the aggro decks are repeatedly able to crush these other archetypes, then you need to either strengthen the other archetypes or weaken aggro or some combination. And I will say that in the Cultic cube, it feels like control is also pretty strong. It feels like control in particular has the best chance of combating aggro, but otherwise feel like the other archetypes struggle against it.
Yeah. Another thing I also noticed with Cultic cube is there are quite a few Planeswalkers. Like Cultic cube, they have a YouTube channel as well. I will also link that here, where they discuss that they don't want to set a limit to Planeswalkers and all the upsides that Planeswalkers have for your cube. But I feel like this is also taking away space for having cute, synergistic card advantage machines out of 2 or 3 cards that you build for yourself. Because a Planeswalker is that engine in itself. And it's a very robust engine, and like you play it and you gain some form of card advantage normally. So while I feel like these cards play very well in the cube, in other cubes, I think you do have to be careful. They take away some breathing room from other card types.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. I think Planeswalkers, as nice as they are to play with when they're on your side, the fact that they effectively draw you so many cards and play so many cards without costing you additional mana, I think it's a little unfortunate for other card types. Though, one note about Planeswalkers too, I do like seeing some of the lesser known ones pop up in Cube. I think Mu Yanling was one of the ones I ran into the other day in Cultic Cube, and that's a nice one for sure. So, more of that stuff for me. Maybe a little less on the Jace the Mind Sculptor side.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the format is designed with them in mind, and I feel like it does play quite well. Certainly, it's not for everybody, but for a very competitive-minded cube group, I think it's very, very good. It's a very good cube.
Right.
I want to end this part where we talk about specific cubes now, but starting next episode, we will also be talking about our own cubes. But since now was such a nice time to have cubes available on Magic Online, we talked about those first. But that is something we would like to talk about our cubes, our philosophies in these cubes. And but another thing that you can also expect from us in the future is going more into detail of a theoretical cube design. I'm really looking forward to do that with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that with you too, Jacob. And yeah, in addition to everything you said, specifically, I guess, with the theoretical cube design, we're looking just at, I guess, what makes Magic tick, how we can maximize fun for people and minimize, I guess, unpleasant experiences where feel like you're getting crushed, and even look at some basic things like player types. So not only...
we have heard that many times from the greats like Maro, that you can't maximize the fun without keeping in mind who are the people that you are playing with, or that are playing your game, your cube.
Right, because different things are fun to different people, and in an ideal world, you would get 8 spikes together or something like that to play Cultic Cube or something like that, but that's just not how things are usually going to come together. So
yeah, or maybe you get 7 spikes and one person who likes to Elvish Piper in some fatties and that doesn't mind to go 1 and 2 or 0 and 3 from time to time, because these cards are there. Like, you can draft them. But sure, I don't know if they are competitive with everything. And right, maybe they don't have to be.
But yeah, I think you make an excellent point there. Winning, which is fun to a lot of spikes, is not necessarily the most fun thing to a lot of other players. And I think it's important to remember that because, we think about Magic, we think about, what makes a deck special? Did it go 3-0? Like, winning 3 matches in a row is so arbitrary. It says nothing. It could say that you drew well or your opponent played poorly. It could say anything. So
yeah, and only one person in a real cube pod can do that.
Right.
And the others should have fun as well.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, but we want to go more in detail the next time. One last thing. We do have a community, a cube crew, where we, from time to time, draft our own cubes and play out the matches on Magic Online. So we are a worldwide community. It's a small community, but with people from many different places.
Always looking to expand.
Yeah, we would like to have you. I will put the link in the show notes, and Max will put them under his YouTube video. So come and join us on our Discord server and see if something's up. Maybe you want to host something yourself and tell us about your cube.
Yep, we'll see you there. Thanks for listening.
Happy cubing!